All right. So, hello everybody. Welcome. Depending on what part of the world you're dialing in from, I know that we have a lot of different countries or areas joining us today, which is fantastic, and I'm sure you're all looking forward to stealing some of the outbound campaigns by myself, but also our very esteemed guest Jesse. Again, I think steal is a strong word. We're going to give them to you willingly. I don't think you need to, you know, take any action against us because it's again I think as people, whether it's in sales or those who do outreach, it's always good to be able to share best practices and talk about what's working. But like I mentioned, we have Jesse here today, so it's a pleasure to have you, Jesse.
Thank you so much, Connor, and thank you to Pierre and Elise for having me.
Fantastic. Yeah. So basically, just to give you a quick run through, you can see already on your screen that this is going to be pretty practical. Myself and Jesse just had a like kind of a quick talk before this. The one thing we want to avoid is talking at you and not giving you any practical use cases or anything you can come away with. So we are going to cover some campaigns in a deep dive, especially the one that we have here, for example, that I've done. But again, we're also going to show something that's worked across the way with Jesse in their experience. And towards the end, we're going to have a really, really deep dive into some of the campaigns that have been working well, along with some frameworks, some theory. But I really want to stress the importance of like we can see the chat. Feel free to interact. We're going to try and pause throughout some of these topics to answer some of your questions. So yeah, just feel free to be as interactive as possible because I think it will help the overall effectiveness of this webinar, and hopefully people can walk away with something that's going to be useful. So yeah, just to address the first slide that we have, so a very quick intro. What we have available to us here is a sample of something that I've been using, and it's been going quite well for me, to be completely honest. You'll see that there are some creative elements here. For example, my GIF of me waving. That's something that's worked quite well for me in the past. It's helped generate and close a lot of deals, to be completely transparent with you. You can see some of the results on the screen as well, across email, across LinkedIn. And I think something that is very important to remember is when we're doing outreach or outbound, it is important to have fun. It's important to get to a stage where you are at least enjoying what you're doing, but we also need to be very mindful of how creative we get because, I've had some people reach out to me before with, let's say, for example, like a Game of Thrones meme. I'm sure it's a fantastic show. I've never watched it. So it's something that falls a bit flat in terms of, trying to catch the eye or having a pattern break. So always try and think about, what we're trying to do. So Jesse, even in your case, do you take any kind of like creative approaches to doing outreach?
That's a great question, Connor. I would say, in terms of the creativity of personalization, I always think about how is this relevant to my prospect's business, to the account, to their top of mind goals. I think if you want to be creative in terms of the university they went to, or a really custom gift or something like that, you can do it in a PS line or for a really, really high value prospect. But when we're trying to outbound at scale, I would say the person level personalization is limited in its value. I would say business relevancy is key over person level personalization.
Yeah.
Not without exception. There are definitely exceptions, and I'll talk a little bit about it in the first campaign that I do in terms of physical gifting, which I think can be really, really effective.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, business value over person level personalization.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think, and just so everyone's aware, we have Pierre working in the background for us. So I think we're going to take a look into this campaign in a bit more detail from lemlist's perspective. So yeah, what we're going to do is basically take a look into how this looks within the platform, give a bit of a breakdown in terms of maybe some of the steps why I took into this. Again, we're not going to spend too much time on this. It's just to give you an insight into basically how some of this is going to work. So based off of this, it is an outbound strategy. You'll see, for example, I do have some of these tasks marked as manual, and we do have some really good approach material to work with here. So some of the reasons why we have the marked as manual in this case is because there's some, placeholders that we want to fill, some personalization that we want to do that's going to be kind of relevant to each individual. Again, the emails themselves, I think they're going to work very straight, very straightforward. People have a lot of experience with them. But the LinkedIn is something that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy just because it is automated. Okay. So, for example, through a platform like lemlist, being able to do that, but you can also introduce this new type of, we'll say, outreach method or channel in the form of a voice message. So, just to give you an idea of something that I've been doing that's working quite well, is you can do the voice messages through lemlist. And essentially, what I do is I just have a placeholder. But what I'll do is I'll set it as a manual task. It will come to me, and I'll actually custom record the voice message that's going to go towards the individual that I'm reaching out to within LinkedIn. Now, if I scroll down, for example, you can see a lot of calls, you can see some LinkedIn. So there's a nice kind of balance of different outreaches here. So true multi-channel outreach. And I think the reason for that is you want to give yourself the best chance across the different forms. So, you have email, LinkedIn, call. So, and especially like with the likes of voice message, again, if you haven't tried that, I'd really, really recommend it just because, whether you do it with us, whether you do it with Lemlist or by yourself, it doesn't really matter. Like you can pick up your phone, do the recording there, or you can do it through like kind of a desktop setup that we have here and do it through Lemlist. So yeah, it's just to kind of give you a bit of an idea towards that. But I would love to hear from the people within the chat right now. What is something that's working for you the best in terms of your outreach channel? Like, are you having more success over LinkedIn, phone, email? I'm just going to give a few seconds in case we have anyone who's looking to share the outreach form.
Do you want me to talk about
Yeah,
multi-channel?
yeah, of course, Jesse. I think if you have some examples, that'd be great.
Yeah. Anne says email. So I think the way that I like to think about outbounding is that every single channel influences another channel,
Yeah,
right? And you'll see when I share my sequences that if I leave a voicemail, I'll direct them back to my email. If I get a connect with them, I will send on LinkedIn, I will send a voice note that maybe says, sorry, I just missed you via cell.
yeah,
If I send a SMS or WhatsApp, I'll say the same thing, that I missed you via cell. And I like to think of the account in the center and all of these different channels as different angles of attack. So some people say, some sales development managers say, lean into your best channel. Ooh, are you sending voice notes and GIFs over first email? Not really, Dan. I try to minimize the amount of links and images in my first email to maximize deliverability. Thank you, Per, for putting that on the screen. My second touch might have a customer story or an AI generated GIF or something like that. Well, I'll talk about that in my sequence. But yeah, pretty much the first touch that I send, especially if it's an inbox that I haven't touched before, will just be text. But yeah, again, I really like to think of all of my channels kind of nudging each other, the other channels closer and closer to the account. And I think it's so much more effective than, I think, one call, one email, one LinkedIn, one SMS, one WhatsApp, one digital gift are so much more effective than 10 calls or 10 emails or 10 LinkedIn, right? Because think about how many different touches you have on your phone or you have on your desktop every day. And the more kind of different pings that you're getting, I don't even talk about this in my sequence, but one that just came to mind is the calendar. You can send a calendar invite and it'll pop up on their calendar. That's another channel. There's so many different channels and they all influence each other.
Yeah. No, and I couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, and that's kind of the reason why I had the question in terms of, I can see a lot of people are coming up with, email, call, LinkedIn. Like what we typically tend to see is like the multi-channel approach, because if for whatever reason, because there are some instances where we do have to be realistic, we've done some data enrichment, we got the phone number, it's not the right phone number, or it's a discontinued line, or the email, or we're having deliverability issues. I think there was a really good comment talking about that, like emails with deliverability. So it's very important to kind of look into that. I just saw the comment there, I think from Coco there. So voice notes feel very invasive. How is the overall success on this outreaching? I think the really important thing to touch on here is when it comes to voice notes, what we're looking to do is we're actually looking to connect with this person in the beginning through a LinkedIn invitation. And what I would always recommend is be upfront. So sometimes what can happen is if you get an invitation without a message, and I might check the person's profile, whether they're in sales or I don't know, in like a an opposite industry, I kind of start to have hesitations because maybe there could be an outreach coming after it. Whereas if I have a rep reaching out to me and they say, "Hey, Connor, this is what we offer. I assume you're struggling with this. Sound interesting?" Then that voice message coming or following on, if I've accepted that invitation, it's a lot less more. It's a lot less invasive because I've already understood that. Hey, this is something I could do. Voice message. Oh, I really like that touch. You know.
Yeah,
So
Connor and Pierre, would this be a good time to shift to my first campaign, or would you like, is there another slide in between?
yeah, I think what we can do is cover some of the theory because what we really want to do is kind
Right,
of
the
get
theory.
through some of the important things here. We want to give you a chance to touch on one of the frameworks that you've brought today, and then we can dive into the campaign just so we can kind of set the scene. Because like what we have up here on the slide, say for example, the two types of campaigns. Obviously, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but it is very important to just get in the mind of the kind of intent-led campaigns and the cold outreach campaigns. So of course, when the trigger is given to you, so like a webinar attendee or like a warm intro, that's going to be something that's very important to keep in mind. But then we also have the cold outreach campaign. So we build our intent, we go out and find it, we use some type of platform to kind of look for it. Especially I think LinkedIn is a huge tool that people use to try and actually go out and prospect that. And if we move on to the next slide, we are going to start touching on kind of like benchmarks for the industry in terms of success. But right down here, and again, we're going to send this recording. The slides are going to be available. The QR code down there, the complete list of triggers. I think that's a really nice document to be able to refer to because there's so many that we could cover, and we just gave some of the most common ones there. But yeah, moving on to this point, so comparing the performance to the industry benchmarks, I think this is a very interesting topic. Jesse, I'm not too sure about you. How do you see it, or how have you seen it in your previous experience in terms of, what would you consider kind of like a good performing campaign across when you're looking at the results?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say when it's intent led, you know, I've seen as high as 15, 20, 25% response rate. When it's cold, really what you're trying to do is build rapport with the account. Get in an op, talk to the right people. If you push for a closed one on the very first time you've talked to a company, I think your rates are going to be nearer to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. I think especially when you move, I think it depends a lot on the segment, right? If you're SMB or velocity and your average deal size is 5K,
Yeah.
maybe you might want to push for a close on the very first conversation. But I think the value of learning, gaining information, and providing value should not be understated here. Or should not be overstated rather, and that the first time you would talk to an account, and the two sequences that I'm going to share with an executive priority cold trigger and a job posting cold trigger, the better the trigger is, the higher your response rate and the higher your close win rate is going to be. But I still say like a really, really good response rate to a cold trigger is maybe 5-10%.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I love that, and I think really, because for me as well, like when we get to these industry benchmarks, it always comes into my mind in terms of like, okay, what industry are we talking about? Like, what size deal? What type customer? Like, I feel like there's so much nuance that we can add to this. So, if we're getting like a 2 or 3% positive response rate, but your average deal size is 50, 60, 100,000, 100,000 for the year type contracts, then it kind of makes it a bit more interesting. So I think I
Exactly.
saw that we had a comment there. So Raphael, what do you consider a decent open rate? I'm struggling a little bit with that. So Jesse, just to pass that over to you, how do you feel about open rates?
That's a great question. So I know there's a lot of different theories about whether tracking opens affect your deliverability or not. I actually, in my personal outreach, I don't track opens. The way that I think you can measure the effectiveness of your campaigns and your outbound messaging without tracking opens is to use an intent tool like a web visitor tool like Common Room or Koala or B2B, Warmly. All of these tools will tell you, hey, if I'm outbounding this account, let's say 20 personas, in a week, and I'm driving traffic to my website, even if it's unidentified, that's probably working. I would say if you are tracking opens and you've got a really good hook or trigger or first line of relevancy or personalization, if that's what you want to call it, I would say 5 to 10% is really good. If you're going, the campaigns that you're going to cover in terms of the signal is provided, right, a referral or a close loss opportunity, I would say 25% is pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just to even touch on that a bit, because a lot of calls that we're having with lemlist and the teams that we're speaking to, this is becoming quite an important topic because what has recently gone on, and I think the key word here is deliverability. The email providers are starting to get a lot more stricter in terms of what they call of like invasive practices. So the actual tracking of opens and clicks, that is something that they've now built into kind of when they're having a look at your email, what's going on here, is this something that we want to do? Now, tracking replies, and I think that's very important to touch on this actual slide itself, positive reply rates, that's like a really, really good indication of if it's working or if it's not working. Having the tracking of the opens and clicks, again, what we discuss it within Lemlist is it's almost like a vanity metric in terms of, hey, I'm getting opens, I'm getting clicks, but are we getting actual results from this? And then we're adding on that new complicated layer of the email providers are starting to say, hey, that's quite invasive. We actually might start putting you into the spam and, or at least detract from your actual email reputation. Again, not to get too technical in that, but it's just to basically share what we've been seeing happening a lot. And within our actual Lemlist team, we try and avoid tracking the open clicks, exactly like you said,
I
Jesse.
would highly encourage, if you are a sales development manager or if you are a RevOps person on the call, I would highly encourage you to A/B test tracking opens and versus not, and see if your positive reply rate goes up, right? Because as you said, Connor, there is really no way to know unless we're on the other end, right? I mean, it can depend on whether they're using Google or Microsoft. It can depend on what kind of firewalls that they have up. It can depend on so many different things. So yeah, I would highly recommend that with all of your reps, you A/B test tracking opens versus not, because really opens don't do anything unless they click something or unless they reply or unless they book that meeting with you. So that's kind of that's the North Star metric that I'm always thinking about, is a reply and a meeting booked.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100% agree. But yeah, so what we'll do is we'll move on to a couple of frameworks. Alex, I did see your questions, so taking a minute to clarify the LinkedIn conditions. We are going to get to that. So after we cover these two frameworks, we're actually going to get into the in-depth campaigns. Again, Jesse can speak to kind of his experience and his breakdown, but if you're looking for a more technical explanation, I can take that in the actual sequence I'm going to cover. So just to kick it off with the actual framework itself, again, I really like approaches like this because similar to what me and Jesse were talking about, when we're talking about success rates, benchmarks, replies, or even open rates and click rates, we're still considering that. Sometimes it can be subjective. There's a lot of factors that can kind of influence it. However, we have so Tal from our side. Tal lives and breathes this email outreach, specifically the example that we have here, and I really like this color coded approach to it. Okay, so essentially what we're looking at is just to keep it simple, keep it direct, make it scannable. Think about how you would receive it on your end. Again, if we have like a 12, 13 paragraph long email and we're going into individual specific, people just aren't going to read it, so you've done the hard work. Even if you've worked on your deliverability, we've worked on our structure and our setup, and then we get to that stage and it fall flat, it's a shame that would happen. So we've seen that this has worked really well. And again, this comes from Tal, who is, another one of our outbound experts. He's worked with so many teams on this. I really can't stress how many teams he's worked on this. And you can see version 3 been through a lot of sweat, tears, blood. So what we're going to do then is basically just take a look into the subject line, keep it simple, trigger, very good, current process. Again, I don't want to read through this. This is something that you have access to after it, but it's very, very important just to decide what approach you're going to take. So you'll see here, for example, the pains or the positive symptoms. Choose one. All right. We don't need to crowd the email. We don't need to keep it. We don't need to have it too complicated. So that's something I think is very important. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get straight into Jesse's campaign, just because, again, we've been touching on this for quite a long time, and we do want to use the majority of the webinar to actually cover this, because I'm sure that there are a lot of actual questions about this.
Cool. So yeah, I want to talk about, before I show the actual sequence, which I think is incredibly valuable, I would actually like everyone in the webinar to do a little bit of live work, which is pick a pain that your solution solves for, and then think about an article that a C-suite member could write about their priorities, or maybe even the operating group could write in their 10K and say, hey, this is something that we're focused on in 2025 or 2026, and we're struggling to XYZ. Put that in the chat. Take 30 seconds or 60 seconds. It can be really, really simple. Here, I'll give you an example. My solution, I work at Twilio Segment, which is a customer data platform, and something one of the primary things that we solve for is a lack of personalization in end consumer touches. So, if you, exactly, thank you very much, Pierre. So if you, go to a website and you click something and you put it in your cart and then you navigate away, you'll usually get a cart abandonment email, right? That's a very, very easy thing. But then who has then been scrolling on TikTok or Instagram or getting an email ad or an SMS ad, and it has nothing to do with what you just looked at. I could be looking at shoes, and they send me an email for a cap, and I just don't wear caps. I wear shoes, right? So that's something that my solution could solve for. So I could look for an executive priority in Google News or on LinkedIn. And that would say, hey, we are looking to improve the personalization of our customer journey, of our customer experience. Our end consumer kind of results need to be more personalized, right? And this is something that a lot of companies think they are doing, and consumers really don't agree. So I'm going to then look on Google, and I can use a bunch of keywords like customer experience, personalization, personalized touches, marketing, etc., plus the company name to find these articles. So once I found one of these, ideally it's going to be written by someone that you can name, a CMO or something like that. And in this campaign, I won't give the name away, but I actually did find, this is a kind of a provider in the auto space that I was prospecting, that I ended up booking a meeting with. And this person actually did write an article about the focus, shifting the focus away from only dealerships and toward kind of consumers and dealerships as a whole. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, there must be a leaky bucket here at Tofu, or even in the middle of the funnel, where people are dropping off because, let's say they clicked that they were interested in used Toyotas and they get an ad for a new Audi or Mazda. Boom, I'm gone. I'm gone from that company. Does that make sense to everyone? So what I'm doing here is a very, very similar structure to what Conor just showed, which is, hey, I just read in this person's article, cite the source, and they're focused on this here, right here. So in the article that I read, it said, we are shifting our focus to kind of dealerships and consumers, balancing them out. And then this is a pain that my solution solves for right here, unifying customer behavior from any digital touch point to build truly personalized campaigns. That means, again, that if I clicked, use Toyota, I'm not going to get an ad for a new Audi or a new Mazda. And then I cite, 2 e-commerce brands, and then give the social proof here, and then the results. Very, very simple touch, right? I always start with an email because, as you'll see, and like I described before, I'm trying to think of each channel as influencing others, getting to the center of that account, and ultimately booking a meeting. Let me try to look at the comments, find more reviews, use our product to review us, back and forth email. Yeah, okay. So again, what I want to do, what I want everyone to do here is pick a pain that your solution solves for, and then be an executive, be a C-suite member of your buyer, be an economic buyer who's going to sign off on your deal, and then backtrack by 6 months or 8 or 10 or 12 months and write an article that, even a headline, one line that says, I really need to accomplish X, and your solution can solve for that. That's the first really actionable takeaway that I want you guys to take from this webinar, because it puts you in the buyer's shoes, and it gets you thinking, oh, wow, this is my priority, and I know, and then back in the seller's shoes, this is how I'm going to outbound them, so they know I understand their business and I understand their priorities. So, okay, let's continue with this campaign here. I always call, and I say, referencing, referencing the email here, and my opener. I know a lot of people have some magic sauce for cold call openers. I don't have any magic sauce for you. What I have is, hi, Jane, this is Jesse Leong. I'm calling from Twilio Segment. Or is this Jane from Planet Fitness? And then I say, this is Jesse Leong calling from Twilio Segment. Reason for the call is I noticed in a recent article that you wrote. Boom, that's it. I lead with the trigger. I lead with the signal. I lead with the executive priority that I found. I never say, when I speak with other CMOs or when I speak with other directors of product, I never say that, because it immediately screams to me, put yourself in the prospect's shoes. That immediately screams to me, oh, they're just reading off a script. They called a bunch of directors of product or a bunch of CMOs and they're saying the same thing. If I don't have a customized one-to-one reason to call that account, I don't call that account. So let that be a takeaway here. And then I won't go through every step here, but essentially I am hitting them from every channel I can possibly, I can. WhatsApp or SMS, send them a connect on LinkedIn. So I do actually want to add I saw a comment about 5 or 10 minutes ago asking, hey, I'm having trouble getting voice notes to convert on LinkedIn. I do want to give a disclaimer here. You can see my voice note is very, very simple. I say, hey, this is Jesse from Twilio. Just gave you a call from my office number. Any chance you saw my email? Subject was just blank, right? Oh, thank you, Pierre, for highlighting that. So I'm not pitch slapping them. I'm not saying, do you want my service right there in the first message? I'm building rapport. I'm letting them know I contacted them on another channel. There's more resources. And hopefully in the second email touch, I'll provide them with a webinar invite or an executive thought piece or a technical recipe if I'm outbounding an engineering team or a product or a technical product persona or something like that. I am very, very insistent on making all of the touches here value add, direct them to my calendar link, which is in my email, right? And I interchange calls, WhatsApp, email. And you can see, no, okay, I'm gonna actually go to the very bottom here. So now I want to talk about digital gifting and physical gifting. And this applies to both this sequence as well as the next sequence, which is job postings, which I'll cover after Conor does his first sequence. But for very, very high value prospects, let's say a VP and above, or maybe even the author of the executive priority article that you've discovered, I might send them, there's a bunch of different gifting programs like Sendoso or ReachDesk, but I want to send them something really, really personalized, maybe a restaurant in their area that I know they like or something like that. And then the next step after that is a physical gift. Look up on their LinkedIn, see if they like golf or traveling or something like that, and then put together a handwritten note and yes, it is definitely heavy, anchor point data tech. Don't do this for every prospect. This is not scalable. I have done this and I have booked meetings with a chief XO for basically, actually you can see in the results of this campaign that I booked a 6-figure deal. I booked a meeting for a potential 6-figure deal with this sequence that I'm giving you right here, this executive priority sequence. And it was totally worth it. But I wouldn't do this with every account. It was really only because I found a perfect article that basically screamed in like a bunch of different bullets, we need Twilio Segment customer data platform. Do I find C-suite execs find SMS or WhatsApp invasive? Actually, no. That's a great question, Crystalie. The good outweighs the bad by an enormous amount, 10x, 25x. So you may not book a meeting via text, but you'll get, okay, I'll check that. Or, hey, I'm not the right person, you should talk to blank. You should talk to this person. So, and I do book meetings via SMS or WhatsApp. So yes, you will get, how dare you text me? This is my personal phone. You will get that. But we're in outbound sales. That's part of the life, right? If you are shying away from a channel, you are leaving stones unturned. Do not shy away from any channel. And even you can see in the sequence that my sequence that I built that you'll get after the webinar, if I'm doing a physical gift and I'm actually near that HQ or that person's office, I will go drop it off in person, show your face, or make a video. So yeah, I would really like to emphasize that every single channel I think of as an angle to kind of penetrate to the center of the account. Connor or chat, do I manually send SMS? Great question. I can, if you have a MacBook, you can put your first personal phone into iMessage, and then I just send via iMessage. The only time that I send a manual SMS, like on my actual phone, is if I call their voicemail first and it validates that their name is, that it is their actual number, they don't have iMessage, and then I text on my personal phone. I don't know that they use WhatsApp, but actually in the United States, we don't use WhatsApp that much. I just put SMS/WhatsApp for EMEA and LATAM. I know we use WhatsApp a lot, but I will take. Should we take questions now about the sequence, Connor, or move on and take questions at the end?
Yeah, no, honestly, I think again, I know they've been, the chat has been excellent and asking questions throughout. I think what we can do again is, people can keep posting them through. If we want to move on to my sequence, we can do that. And then again, if people want to circle back, because I feel like again, the sequence that I have, it's going to help answer a lot of these questions because I can see a lot of people saying like, does email work? Email deliverability? Is anyone cold calling anymore? Like some of the things that we've seen there. And I really, really agree with what you said, Jesse, is this idea of kind of variation. Use the different modes, use the different channels. Me personally, if I got a call from someone out of the blue, I'd probably hang up, or I probably wouldn't be interested unless it was like, I don't know, they were going to give me €1 million, then I might listen. But again, we know not to listen to those calls. But it's more so about kind of setting the scene, So you got them with an email, you have your strong email, you have something to help with your deliverability, you outreached. You have your LinkedIn touch point. We have our call, we have our SMS. Like this person will know who you are by the end of this. And I think it's also a really, really good thing that you touched on, Jesse, in terms of like outbound is hard. You will have some people who, I think I had an example there the other day, and I had gotten through like the email, LinkedIn, all these different types of steps. And for whatever reason, the last step of the email, a variable had changed. I think it gave them the wrong name. Now, this is at the end of the sequence. And somebody reached out to me and said, I think it was like, oh, you need to check your variables, buddy. And that's after 2-3 weeks of reaching out with everything else. So you're going to get people like that on the flip side.
Life. That is the life in outbound. We chose to live it. Yep.
So you're gonna.
You would not be here in this webinar if one angry prospect turned you off from the outbound life. So
yeah, exactly. So I think that's important to touch on. Again, this second sequence that we're looking at, the webinar attendees campaign. So what I can do is I can share that individual campaign. Again, a lot of this is actually to work through or kind of just reiterate on what Jesse touched on. This is kind of more of a, so remember in the beginning, we talked about kind of the trigger and non-trigger campaigns. So, cold outreach versus something that has happened. Webinar attended, that's something that's very straightforward. Again, if you get this email after the webinar, you know where it came from. But it's just to be completely transparent and show you how we actually do this outreach. So to touch on a few things, because obviously I live and breathe lemlist. This is something that I talk about every day. So email outreach, that's something that's very, very important. And I think regardless if you're doing a trigger-based campaign or a pure cold outreach campaign, you've built out the triggers yourself, there's a few good things that we can talk about here. So the actual breakdown of it, again, we're trying to stick as close as we can to the framework that we showed from Tal previously. Having our different triggers, making it easy to digest, and seeing if we can hit that value or call to action towards the end, which is very important. But this approach then is what we call an inbox rotation. Now, I assume there's a lot of people in the chat or on this webinar very familiar with this. I'm sure you've done so many hours of research into this. There's a few things to touch on within here. Again, I am going to speak from lemlist perspective and lemlist use case. There are other providers out there, okay, just so you are aware, but it's just to show you what it looks like within our platform. So when it comes to deliverability or effective email outreach, before we even get to that idea of the framework or how we're developing the actual copy, we need to make sure that a few things are in check. So one is that the domain or domains that we're using have a high deliverability. Okay. And what we mean by that is they have a good domain reputation when you're doing your outreach to the prospect, the email provider that they use, whether it's Google, Outlook, Yahoo, whoever it is, that they can see that you have some good positive kind of background or interactions behind your email domain, and it will be received more positively. In other words, it's not going to go into the spam email. The reason we have the multi-inbox approach here is rather than doing just one really strong domain or really a domain with a really strong deliverability score, is why not have four? Why not have five? Because then we start to be able to, reduce the sending limits, hit our overall volume metric, but have a very successful approach within the actual email. And again, I really, really want to stress this. If it's trigger, if it's cold outreach, this is going to apply across the board. Okay. So that is a very, very important step. Again, it's something that I do want to touch on because when we have teams coming onto the calls with us and they want to chat about lemlist, these are what we've seen or, what has been used as the best practices. Okay, so that's the email itself. Again, I'm on the screen for the actual sequence here. I'm going to take a pop off this and have a look at what some of the questions are being answered in a couple of minutes. But it's just to touch on then some of the other follow throughs. Again, calls very straightforward. It's literally like we touched on in the beginning there. Set the scene. Okay, if you don't feel comfortable calling somebody out of the blue, you think they might be mad or hang up, send your email, send your LinkedIn, send WhatsApp or SMS. Actually make an attempt to get in touch with them, and then we can start running through the actual call campaign or the call steps within the campaign. What I really want to go down to is the LinkedIn actions. Okay, something we have a bit specific that's a bit special within lemlist, because we're able to do this automatically. Again, we have the option to do it as a manual task or an automatic task, whatever works best for you. The voice message, again, I'm going to keep touching on this because I think it is a really, really good way of doing outreach. Now, with the recording of the manual recording, we touched on this in the first campaign I showed. We do have a beta feature. All right. So again, I want to stress beta feature here. You're able to basically, and like I said, you should have fun with outbound. This was really fun. Okay, our product team have done an amazing job in making this available to our users. So what you do is you basically kind of like record your voice, you read the transcript, you put in your prompts here with your variables as if you would be doing for the actual email outreach, and then you run it. Okay, and you can do it at scale, and it's going to change the name, it's going to change the exactly like Jesse was talking, the article, for example, and you can test it like that. So if you're already an active lemlist user, you have access to this. If you want, there's free trials. You can go on, you can test the platform again. You don't lose anything. It's just so you know what's out there. Okay, you know what kind of we'll say tools that can make your life easier. And I think the voice message again, there's always a bit of hesitance to go in it. We're not too sure what it's going to look like, but I would really encourage you to test it out. Okay. But the overall benefit of this is, again, the actual email message. That's where we're going to see as being kind of like the real hook. The call itself, we're going to have a replication of what Jesse went on in terms of the, I'm calling you because you attended the webinar. In this case, you're familiar with lemlist, and then we have a conversation that way. And then we also want to touch on the LinkedIn here as well. Okay, so again, I really don't want to kind of like go into it in too much detail. It is, I think we've covered the main parts that I think are really important. So let me just take a pause and let me check
Connor,
in with some
can I
questions.
answer a
Yeah, of course.
question
Yeah,
from Nadej Valois? I guess attendance can be a variable, right? Nadej, I'm assuming, and I hope I pronounced your name right, I'm assuming that you mean whether the prospect attended the webinar or no-showed. This is something, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but this is something that I love to talk about because the way I look at a webinar no-show is that's just an opportunity to say, hey, prospect who no-showed, why don't I just customize the content from the webinar for you on a quick meeting? Boom, send your calendar link, meeting booked right there. So a no-show for a webinar can be as valuable, maybe not more, but it can be as valuable. Yeah, okay, Nadesh. Yeah, it can be as valuable as a webinar that you registered for.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yes,
So
Danielle, I'm about to share my second sequence for cold outreach. That'll be a job trigger. And Pierre, you can confirm in the chat whether my sequences will be provided to the attendees after this. I believe they will. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll make sure to share all of this. I just saw before, yeah, I know we're going to pass it over to you, Jesse, but even just in terms of what's a good deliverability, I have some of my domains currently at 78. So if you've seen the question there by Austin, that's an important thing to touch on. So typically what warm-up tools will measure it would, kind of be between, you'll see like, it could be anywhere like a 30-40 is like a really not good one, but then 90 to 100 or 80 to 100 is seen as like the good space or the good area. What we see within our own warm up tool is typically between 80 to 100. That's like the sweet spot, and that's when you have it at a warm level. Now, if you see kind of a measure between 60 and 70 when you first get started, we recommend that you decrease your sending volume as you continue to do the warm up process. So you don't necessarily need to. Now, if you want to leave it, it's going to warm up quicker. Okay. But that then means that the domain that you're going to use 2-3 weeks might be out of action until you get up to your actual level that you need. So what we sometimes recommend to users if they want to do kind of like a parallel usage would be put it into the warm up tool, have kind of a low sending volume. You're talking like 5-10 emails per day, like very, very, very low. You can still use that as outreach, but we want to make sure we're having more positive impact than potential negative impact, because when we reach out to people on a cold basis, typically they'll have some spam filters, unknown senders, and it can go that way. But yeah, sorry, Jesse, go ahead with your next sequence.
And I'm sharing Pierre, so you can move to my screen if you'd like. Yeah. So this is one that I really love, and I see a very, very high conversion rate here. So the subject is literally just going to be, so in the what you see on screen here is a real job. And I will actually share, this is from Planet Fitness, an account that I'm outbounding right now because this is public. So I have not shared any internal information from the company. This job post is for a VP of member experience for Planet Fitness that they're actually hiring right now. And these are the actual responsibilities that you can see in the job post. So if you just Google VP of Member Experience, Planet Fitness, you will actually see this job post. My subject line is VP of Member Experience. And I have determined that the prospects I'm outbounding are either on the same level or report to, or the VP of Member Experience reports to them. And the text is incredibly, or the format is incredibly simple. Saw you were hiring a VP of Member Experience, noticed a few of the responsibilities, matched common use cases for a customer data platform like Twilio Segment, bullet out the use cases here, or the job responsibilities that match the use cases here. Curious how Planet Fitness is doing these today. Brands in your space like CrossFit use Twilio Segment for all the above use cases, leading to seamless CX and 24% registration click rate. So this is just social proof and results and light CTA. This one, what I want you to do right here for everyone in the chat, think you can go to a career page of one of your accounts right now and look at some of the job. If you sell to sales, look at the sales job post. If you sell to marketing, look at the marketing job post. If you sell to HR, look at the HR job posts. And if you don't find anything, what I want you to do is write something like that. Write a job post where the responsibilities are, now it could be an IC job, individual contributor job post, or end user job post. It could be a manager who supervises the end users of your solution, or it could even be a director who's responsible for the KPIs that are produced by using your solution, that are improved by using your solution. And write a job post, and then you will know exactly what to look for. Right? There are tools that aggregate this. Again, Common Room is the one that we use that I really love, that will pull out job posts from different, from the career pages of all of the accounts that I'm outbounding, that I upload into a particular play there. But I really want and feel free to put it in the chat. If you come up with even one line, like this one right here, let's see. Work with the strategy team to develop a comprehensive data strategy to gather, analyze, and act on member insights, driving continuous improvement in the customer experience and informing decision-making across the organization. This basically, when I saw this, I was like, this person needs to use Segment, or their team needs to use Segment customer data platform. That this screams it to me. And the fact that this was written by Planet Fitness and not by me means outbound this account, if that makes sense to everyone. So write a job description and do 2 or 3 bullets of I have 5 bullets here, maybe a little bit much for a first email. I probably would simplify it to 2 or 3. But this job post was such gold that I don't remember how many I actually sent to them. but I really highly encourage everyone to do this with your solution. It's great practice. If you're in RevOps or sales development management right here, have your reps do this. Have them write an actual job description that involves job responsibilities that are use cases for your solution. It is absolutely invaluable to be able to do this and again put yourself in the prospect shoes. So the sequence here is pretty similar to the one that I did for the executive priority or executive thought piece or executive article, however you want to term that. It's basically, again, just making sure that you're using a bunch of different channels and directing them all back to your booking link in your email, not providing value at every step. And that can be, again, a webinar invite, a thought piece from your leadership. It can be a link to the job article. It can be a very quick slide. It can be a recipe from your website, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm really just kind of directing them back to that original email that had all of the use cases for my solution that match exactly what they put on their website that I did not influence. They put this out, and this person and their team is definitely going to need my solution. Let me start reading the chat a little bit. To use WhatsApp for all prospects. Yeah, that's a great question. So again, Connor, maybe do you want to speak to WhatsApp? Because we don't use WhatsApp much here in the US.
Yeah, of course. I think it's going to depend very heavily on the market that you're dealing with. So I know that WhatsApp is, so I think especially within lemlist, like within Latin America, it's huge. It's absolutely like it's like a necessity, you know. Obviously, you do need to think about how you're structuring your approach, make your introduction, things like that. But yeah, it's absolutely key or vital. I think it does depend on different markets. I think, like you were saying, Jesse, US haven't seen it used as much. From as far as my experience,
We
even
definitely
people.
we definitely use SMS and iMessage more than RCS/SMS and iMessage more than we use WhatsApp. But for social gong, I would say it's really, really important that so my initial when I'm SMS, RCS, or WhatsApp, my initial message is always, "Is this Connor from lemlist?" And that's because if you name their company, they know that you're selling B2B. It's not telemarketing. It's not spam, right? And the answer will usually be, "Yes, who is this?" And then you just say, "Hi, this is Jesse from Twilio. Hi, this is Connor from Lemlist. I sent you an email or missed you via phone, or the subject is this." No pitch. Just say, leave your email, leave your phone, or leave the subject of the email that you sent them, etc. Does that make sense? So if you're, if you say, "Hey, is this Connor from Lemlist?" and then Connor says yes, and then you send them your booking link and then an article to a link to a marketing page and stuff like that, that's called pitch slapping. Don't do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think there were a few other questions that came up in the meantime. So I think we have, so Lauren, for example, has said, how long do you test a sequence before you determine it needs
Yeah,
tweaking
I
or
love
change?
this question. Lauren, thank you very much. So I'm going to actually say it really depends. Now, I know this is not a great answer, but it depends on how long your average sales cycle is / what your average ACV is, and how long it normally takes to, I would just say how long your sales cycle is. If you sell a point solution where the average ACV is 5K and average deal cycle is 2 weeks, try a month before you change the sequence. B2C. I didn't know we had B2C people here. Yeah, let me answer that separately. So I'm going to answer that first in the context of B2B and then B2C. So yeah, it really depends on how long your average sales cycle is. I would wait as long as your average sales cycle is, and then add more before you change up your sequence. Basically, you need the entire duration of your sales cycle from first meeting book to signature to test that sequence. Now, if you sell a very complicated platform solution like I do, where the sales cycles can be 6 to 12 months, you may need to keep using the same sequence even though you're not seeing results. And I would caution everyone in this webinar away from, if your solution has a really long sales cycle, changing before you have enough data, right? If your sales cycle is 6 to 12 months and it typically takes 1 quarter to get someone on a first call, and you're changing sequences every week, you are not going to have good data. Does that make sense? Lauren, let me answer. In the context of B2C, I would say you can shorten everything. B2B sales cycles are typically longer, ACV is higher, depends on what so I would say depends on what your average order value is, and take the first touch attribution for your B2C customers to the point in conversion time. If that's a week, change up your sequences after 2 weeks. If it's 3 days, like if you're selling CPG or something like that, and your first touch to conversion is 3 days, try another sequence after 1 week. Does that make sense?
Yeah, fantastic. And I think even just to touch on that as well, yeah, of course. So a lot of this is B2B, especially when we're getting into like LinkedIn and stuff like that. Typically, that wouldn't fit the kind of typical B2C outreach model. But yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Jesse. I think it's something that a lot of people can kind of come away with and just think about, you know, do we need to cut something short? Like do we have all the data? And that's a conversation that we get into a lot with whether it's actual customers or potential customers within lemlist. This idea of my sequence hasn't been working after 2 weeks, and then you say, well, how long is your sequence? 21, 28 days.
Yeah,
So like
then you don't have enough data. Keep doing it.
So we're literally kind of at the halfway point, depending on, because again, like if we use multiple emails for the domain sending, we can send a lot of emails, but maybe we only have one LinkedIn account to work from. So it's very important to let that data trickle through and then actually have the ability to take a look at it, the same way you would do maybe like a fiscal year or, a year for a company. Like, how did we do? The second month, we're not going to turn around and go, this isn't working, because we need to actually get to the end of it, and we need to basically see, hey, what's going on? What did we do well? Where can we improve? So I think that's a really good point. I think I saw another question as well from Catherine. So what would the limit be for LinkedIn automation and outreach? That's a really good question. LinkedIn is typically very, we'll say they have recommendations in terms of what you should do. What we have within Lemlist, just even to give you an example of like the connection request or the invitation request, by default, you'll start off with 20. Okay. Now, what we've seen, or based on the current LinkedIn documentation, if you have a premium or sales navigator license, you can go up to 30. But it's very important to stick between those recommendations. Now, Lemlist, we always try and keep up to date and make those recommendations within the platform. But just keep in mind that, obviously we're looking for a more quality approach. We really don't want to increase it up past that level, because then we might run into some issues in that case. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Again, the LinkedIn messages are kind of the same, probably around that 30 mark. So that's something that's going to be very, very important.
Connor, do you want to answer the difference between cold calling B2B and B2C from Social Dawn?
I think you can take it, Jesse. I think we have some time.
Sure. So I would say, oh, you know what? No. You have a closed loss provide. I'll answer this very quickly, and then you can do your last sequence.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. If you're calling B2C, there is a high risk of do not call. What I would recommend there is using a numbers provider that can kind of change your number as much as possible. And if you're calling B2B and you're calling from your personal number, either in a dialer or actually from your phone, you can tell your provider, Verizon, T-Mobile, whatever it is, that you are a B2B sales rep and to remove the do not call. And they will usually do that.
Fantastic. So yeah, I am conscious of time. I think it's going to be, again, we're gonna come into this approach of just trying to finish it off with the actual closed lost revival itself. So within the actual context of what we're looking out for, again, I don't want to read what's off the screen. You're gonna get these slides. You're gonna have the webinar. You'll be able to do it. So I think what might be a bit useful is if we actually share the sequence itself, so you can see what it looks like within the actual outreach, within Lemlist itself. So basically, just even to touch on like some of the conditions that we have here, again, you're seeing that I think the more flexibility you can have within an outreach process, the better. Okay. So that's why we try and make a lot of conditions available to you, like opened email. Again, that kind of goes against what we had talked about earlier on in terms of the actual open tracking. So, always keep your head in the spin. always make sure that we're considering that. But again, these are people that we've reached out to before. Okay, so these are people that the deal didn't go so well, or we've been in contact with them for a long time. So always consider the context. That's what I say. Always take what we're saying as well. We're trying to be as specific as possible, but take a pinch of salt with the actual context because it's going to differ across a lot of different industries. So even if we take a look at, again, there's so many different examples here: the invitations, the voice messages, like the email itself. It's just to give you a look into what we're actually touching on here. Just because we have quite a strong HubSpot integration that the product team has done an excellent job on. So that's something that we're really trying to push, given the amount of developments that we're using, and try and get those people interested again. So I think rather than kind of walking through this again and just kind of reiterating what myself and Jesse have been saying, what could be a good idea is maybe if we leave the last around 5 minutes just for any open questions that are there. Now, it can be related, well, hopefully it would be related to what we've discussed today. But again, feel free to share it. We will try and get through as much as we can, but keep in mind there's 5 minutes. So yeah, honestly, feel free to jump in. And I think while those questions are coming in, I do just want to take a moment, Jesse, to say thank you very much. I think your insight and your expertise within this area, like I'm coming away learning a lot of stuff. I think especially with the article and the job posting, that's like an insanely good recommendation. So I think that's something that's going to be very again, that's going to be very useful for me. So just to say that to you, of course, we'll obviously have that kind of outro that we need towards the end of it. But yeah, just so you're aware of that. So we have Olive on there. So we can buy numbers on lemlist. Yes, you can. The 5 markets that we support is the UK, US, Belgium, France, and Germany. Typically what we recommend for markets outside of that is if you have an existing number, you can connect that and do the calls through lemlist. You'll get the transcript and it'll all be available for you in terms of actual performance, we'll say monitoring and trying to improve certain areas. I think so. We have one come through here from Jason. Okay, so how many outbounds are you sending a day a week? Jesse, what do you think about this?
So it depends on who you are, right? If you're a marketing persona, definitely in the thousands. If you have a lot of inboxes, definitely in the thousands. I am a sales development representative, B2B software sales development representative. So I'm sending 40 to 50 a day. But again, this is because mine are really, really tailored and super relevant to a trigger that I have found on the account. And I am, I'm taking 2 to 3 minutes per email to write that. Now, I'm sending the same, like if I find 5 product personas at the same account, I'm sending them at the same level, I'm sending them the same email. So you can kill 2 birds or 3 birds or 4 birds with one stone by sending the same persona at the same account, the same email. If you are another B2B SaaS SDR and you're sending 200 emails a day, you're doing spray and pray. And it's your triggers and your events and your personalization are not scaling up with you.
Yeah, definitely. I think even okay, so the actual conditions work. Okay, yeah. So the accepted invite within X days and wait until invite accepted, for example. Yeah. So there's essentially it depends what you want to do, Alex. Again, so the if we want to do within a certain amount of days, it's basically giving us that option for the yes or the no. So if it's accepted within, for example, I think one of the cases that Jesse has, like within 7 days, we're going to go down the yes branch, which typically would be chat message, voice message, whatever it needs to be. If it's no, then we can do the profile visit. We can go email, call, any type of approach that you need. The reason we have, or personally, what I would recommend is to do the accepted invites within a day, because then you can progress. Okay, so you can take it down different approaches. If we do wait until accepted invite, it will not move past that point. That's fine if they accept quickly, but what if they don't accept within 8, 9, 10 days? We haven't reached out to them in 8 or 9, 10 days. So they haven't actually been able to progress throughout the sequence. So there are some instances, if we're doing purely LinkedIn outreach and we want to make sure that we can get the chat message and voice message, that wait until the accepted invite is a great option. But what I would normally recommend is do the invite within a certain amount of days, because if you're doing the multi-channel approach, then you can take it to different areas.
I want to answer that question, and Peter R. from about 4 minutes ago has a similar question. I'm finding many people will accept my LinkedIn connection request. Thank you, Pierre. Are you using multi-channel? Are you doing email, SMS, WhatsApp, call, voicemail? That's another important one that I haven't spoken about. If you aren't, that's probably why. You need to direct people to your other channels, let them know that you've tried to contact them, and provide value, not just talk about your solution in your voice note. If you're only talking about your solution in your voice note and you're only trying to get a person to book a meeting on one channel, that's why you're not converting.
Yeah, definitely. So what I'm going to do, because I know we have a couple of minutes left, I think what I'm going to do is, when Pierre feel that, don't feel the need to share this, I think we can get through a few of these questions really quickly. So Catherine, I saw you said if we pull leads from HubSpot, and I'm going to get to Z Griffin, I think, after. If we pull leads from HubSpot, should the list be active or static? I would recommend static, just because if you have more dynamic variables, there's an option within lemlist that you can either add people or take it away to the sequence. It cuts down on your manual work. It can be a lot more automated. It makes your process a lot more efficient. Okay. Just to have another look through here. Yeah, so Z Griffin, so we can come back to that one, Pierre. So would you send the same outbound message or email to the people in the same sector, branch, or function recruitment agency in the Netherlands? I think it's always good to differentiate whether you're trying to address a specific pain of a persona. I don't think, like, if I'm doing an outreach, the thing I don't want changing is now if they look after the same function, that's perfectly fine. I think you're valid in going and actually offering that recommendation or where you can help. But the other thing to touch on is if they don't share anything in common, I would look and see exactly like Jesse had recommended, what are they trying to solve? If you had a job posting and they're looking for someone, what are they trying to do? So I think the actual outbound message should change slightly in terms of value proposition, because what I've seen has worked well is not necessarily targeting. So, we look after, or we look to target, like, sales teams and RevOps teams. If I'm to go for 2 people within RevOps, or if I'm to go to 4 people at different levels of the sales organization, it's a lot more effective for me, because one might be a no, and the other might be, oh, actually, hey, we've been considering this. It's not something we have on the roadmap, but let's have a chat. Okay.
I would say don't write an entirely different email. Say the same thing, change a little bit, add a PS. If different people, same sector, same branch, same function, same company, copy and paste and then change a little bit. Save yourself time.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think, to be completely honest, I think we've come to the end of the video. So sorry, for the end of the webinar. Jesse, again, I really want to take the chance to actually thank you for taking this time. I know you're busy. I know you're doing a lot of good work over in Twilio as well. So again, major thank you. Thank you for everybody who's attended the webinar. We will try and get back on some of those questions, and even the recommendations for further webinar or future webinar topics. We're really going to start to consider them. We'll come away and hopefully we'll plan something that can be useful to everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing stuff. Bye, everybody. Have a great week.